The rain had just started falling over Santa Monica, tapping against the windows of a small apartment filled with camera gear, storyboards, and the kind of hope that doesn't fade easily. Marcus Reed, 29, sat hunched over his laptop, eyes tired but burning with determination. He was finishing the final cut of his short film, The Streets Remember. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't made with big studios or famous actors. It was made with truth. The story of a black teenager navigating systemic bias in modern America. Marcus leaned back, exhaling deeply as he clicked export. The progress bar crawled slowly, but to him, it was the line between dream and recognition. He opened the website for the Silver Coast Film Festival, one of the biggest indie showcases on the West Coast. Winning here could mean everything: funding, exposure, legitimacy. He filled out the submission form carefully, typing in every detail with reverence. Name, Marcus Reed. Title, The Streets Remember. Genre, drama. Budget, $2,000. Then came the section labeled Director's Bio. He hesitated, typing slowly, independent filmmaker from Oakland, California. Passionate about storytelling that reflects truth, community, and resilience. He uploaded the file, checked the boxes, and hit submit. For a moment, the room was completely silent. Then Marcus smiled. Not the kind of smile that comes from victory, but from hope. Across town, in a sleek downtown office decorated with movie posters and champagne flutes, Victoria Sloan scrolled through the new submissions. She was the Silver Coast Festival's senior organizer. Elegant, sharp-tongued, and famously selective. Her assistant glanced at the screen. "We've got over 600 entries this year." Victoria sighed dramatically, and 5 of them might actually be good. She skimmed through submissions, glossy projects from film schools, big sponsors, familiar surnames. Then she clicked on one that caught her eye. The Streets Remember. She frowned. Budget, $2,000, no recognizable cast. Her assistant shrugged. Independent filmmaker from Oakland. Victoria gave a faint smirk. Let me guess, another urban drama trying to be profound. She clicked play, watching the first 30 seconds of Marcus's film. The screen flickered with raw street scenes, cracked pavement, kids playing basketball, a mother crying behind police tape. Victoria stopped it before the first line of dialogue. Amateur, she muttered. Her assistant hesitated. Should I put it in the review batch? No, Victoria said flatly, closing the tab. We don't have time for every vanity project someone shot on a phone. Pass. And with one click, she erased months of someone's dream. But Marcus didn't know that yet. He spent the next few days checking his email, heart skipping every time he saw a notification. When the rejection finally came, it was one cold line. Thank you for your submission. Unfortunately, your film was not selected for this year's festival. Marcus stared at it for a long time, the same way a fighter stares at the mat after being knocked down. But then, slowly, he sat up, whispered to himself, I'm not done. Because what Victoria didn't realize was that The Streets Remember was already beginning to circulate, online, in communities, among other filmmakers. And soon, it wouldn't just be a submission she ignored. It would be a story she couldn't escape. The morning of the Silver Coast Film Festival glimmered with California sun, banners fluttering along palm-lined streets. The air buzzed with conversation. Actors rehearsing smiles, critics snapping photos, sponsors shaking hands like they owned the future. Marcus Reed stepped off the bus 2 blocks away from the main venue, carrying a worn leather backpack and a stack of DVDs. He wasn't on the official list of filmmakers. He hadn't been invited. But he was there anyway. His film, The Streets Remember, had been rejected weeks ago, but he couldn't bring himself to stay home. He needed to see it all, the lights, the faces, the people who decided what stories mattered. He stood for a moment outside the Pacific Arts Center, staring at the red carpet rolled out in front of the building. Photographers flashed their cameras at passing celebrities. Volunteers in black shirts checked badges and waved in guests. Marcus straightened his jacket, exhaled, and stepped forward. A security guard held up a hand. Invitation? Marcus smiled faintly. I'm a filmmaker. Independent submission. The guard glanced at his badge. General admission. Public screening only. Sorry, man, the guard said. This area is for featured filmmakers and press. Marcus nodded, not angry, just steady. I get it. He moved aside, watching the glittering crowd pass him by. Young directors in tailored suits, PR managers clutching schedules, influencers filming every second for their followers. Inside the lobby, Victoria Sloane floated from one conversation to another, the queen of the night in a white blazer and flawless smile. She shook hands with producers, laughed with journalists, and scanned the room like someone taking attendance in her own empire. When her assistant whispered, "We've got the judges seated for the opening screening," Victoria nodded briskly. "Perfect. Let's start the show." As the lights dimmed in the theater, Marcus slipped quietly into the back row. He didn't belong there, not officially, but no one noticed the guy in the shadows. The first few films rolled, polished, expensive, predictable, high-gloss cinematography, perfect dialogue, empty stories. The crowd clapped politely. Marcus sat silently, feeling invisible but strangely calm. He wasn't there to fit in. He was there to understand. During intermission, he wandered into the courtyard, where filmmakers mingled over champagne and canapes. He overheard one conversation after another about funding, agents, branding. No one talked about storytelling. Then he saw her, Victoria Sloane, standing beneath a silver banner, laughing with a famous producer, her posture effortlessly confident. Marcus hesitated, then walked over, heart pounding. "Excuse me," he said, his voice polite but firm. "Are you Mrs. Sloane?" She turned, giving him a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, and you are—" "Marcus Reed," he said, offering his hand. "I submitted The Streets Remember for the festival." Her smile froze just slightly. "Oh, right. I remember that one." "You do?" he asked. "Of course," she said smoothly. "We had hundreds of entries, though, and we can't include everything." "I understand," Marcus said. "I just wanted to thank you for reviewing it." She gave a short, dismissive laugh. "Well, I don't personally review all the lower-budget submissions, but I'm sure our team appreciated your effort." Something in her tone sliced through him. The word effort, the way she said it like pity, wrapped in politeness. He nodded slowly. "You know," he said, "I made that film for the people who never get to tell their stories. Not for festivals, not for trophies." Victoria smiled the kind of smile used to end conversations. "That's lovely. Keep working on your craft. Maybe one day you'll get there." He met her gaze, calm but unflinching. "Maybe one day I'll already be there." She blinked, not sure how to respond. But before she could, a volunteer approached her with a clipboard. "Ms. Sloane, the next Q&A is starting." "Coming," she said quickly. Then to Marcus, "Good luck with your future projects." She walked away, heels clicking sharply against the floor. Marcus stood there for a moment, watching her go, then pulled one of his DVDs from his backpack. He walked over to a nearby table stacked with festival brochures and discreetly set the disc beside them, then another near the refreshment stand, and another by the press booth. By the time the next crowd filtered in, a dozen copies of The Streets Remember were scattered through the venue, waiting for someone curious enough to pick one up. Marcus didn't know who would see it. He just knew someone would. And sometimes that's how movements start. Not with applause, but with quiet defiance. By Sunday morning, the glamour of the Silver Coast Film Festival was in full swing. Flashbulbs popped outside and influencers posed near posters of films with million-dollar budgets. Inside the venue, coffee cups and deadlines collided. Critics scribbling notes, journalists rushing to publish early reviews. Among them was Elliot Gaines, a 35-year-old film blogger with messy hair, cheap sneakers, and a passion for real cinema. The kind that made you feel something. He wasn't an A-list critic, not even close. He ran a small YouTube channel called Frame of Truth, known for uncovering hidden gems that big studios ignored. As Elliot waited in line for his next screening, something caught his eye. A plain, unmarked DVD sitting on a table near the lobby. No label, no press kit. Just a black Sharpie scrawl. "The Streets Remember. Dear Marcus Reed." He frowned, picking it up. "Huh, never heard of this one." The volunteer behind the table shrugged. "Someone must have left it there." Elliot smiled faintly. "Guess I just found my next story." He tucked it into his backpack, skipping his next screening. Instead, he went back to his hotel room, popped the DVD into his laptop, and hit play. The screen flickered, shaky handheld shots of Oakland streets, kids laughing on cracked pavement, a police siren in the distance, a mother calling her son inside. Then came the dialogue, Simple, raw, honest. Within minutes, Elliot forgot he was watching a low-budget film. The performances felt real. The sound design was rough but emotional. The story built tension not through effects, but through silence. Those long, aching pauses that said what words couldn't. By the time the credits rolled, Elliot was sitting still, heart pounding. He whispered to himself, "Who is this guy?" He replayed certain scenes, pausing on Marcus's name in the credits. Then he opened his laptop and started typing. Every once in a while, a film breaks through the noise. Not with money or fame, but with truth. The Streets Remember is one of those films. Directed by Marcus Reed, a name you probably don't know yet. But you will. He uploaded his review with the title, "The Best Film Silver Coast Rejected." Within hours, it started spreading, first through small indie circles, then across Twitter, Reddit, and film forums. People wanted to see it. By the next day, hundreds were sharing clips ripped from the DVD, quoting scenes, calling it raw, haunting, unfiltered reality. Even some festival staff started whispering about it. When Victoria Sloan arrived at her office Monday morning, she found her assistant holding a tablet with the review open. Victoria, he said nervously, you should see this. She frowned, scrolling through the article. Her own festival's name was right there, in the headline, mocked by implication. The best film, Silver Coast, rejected. Her jaw tightened. Who is this Marcus Reed? Independent filmmaker, her assistant said. Apparently, people love his film. It's going viral. Some are even saying we made a mistake. Victoria scoffed, tossing the tablet onto her desk. Viral doesn't mean quality. People love drama. Her assistant hesitated. Maybe we should at least screen it. No, she snapped. We've already announced our finalists. I won't rewrite the schedule because some YouTuber got sentimental. She turned away, fixing her hair in the reflection of the office window. It'll fade in a few days. They always do. But it didn't. That night, The Streets Remember was shared by a major director on social media with the caption, "This is the kind of film festivals should be celebrating." By morning, thousands were watching it. By noon, reporters were asking why Silver Coast had turned it down. And by evening, the festival's reputation and Victoria's career were under the kind of spotlight no PR team could control. By midweek, the glossy surface of the Silver Coast Film Festival had begun to crack. The banners still shimmered. The champagne still poured. But beneath the glamour, whispers spread like wildfire. Did you see that film online? Yeah, the one they rejected? It's better than half the lineup. Who's in charge of selections again? The whispers grew louder with every passing hour. Victoria Sloan, once the untouchable face of the festival, now felt the ground shifting beneath her designer heels. Her email inbox overflowed with press inquiries, each one more pointed than the last. Why did Silver Coast reject Marcus Reed's film? Was there bias in your selection process? Will you issue a statement? She ignored them all, or tried to. In her office, she paced the floor, snapping at her assistant. This is ridiculous. It's one low-budget film. People get emotional online, then they move on. Her assistant, pale and nervous, cleared his throat. It's not just online anymore. The LA Times called. Variety too. Victoria froze. Excuse me. They're covering the story. The headline says, "The film that embarrassed Silver Coast." She snatched the tablet from his hand. There it was. A full article with screenshots of Marcus's movie, clips from the viral review, and a quote from a famous director praising his authenticity. Her own name was right there in print. Festival director Victoria Sloan declined to comment. Her stomach dropped. She stared out the window, trying to breathe. Below, the red carpet for that evening's premiere was being set up. The same place where she'd smiled, laughed, dismissed, and moved on. Now, everyone was watching her move. Meanwhile, Marcus Reed sat in a coffee shop a few miles away, completely unaware of how big his story had become. His phone buzzed endlessly. Messages from strangers, journalists, film students, even producers. He had gone from anonymous to unavoidable overnight. When the phone rang again, he almost didn't answer, but something about the number made him pause. Hello? Mr. Reed, said a warm voice on the other end. This is Daniel Harper, chair of the Silver Coast jury. Marcus blinked. Uh, hello. I wanted to reach out personally, Harper continued. There's been some oversight regarding your film. The jury hadn't actually received it during the initial review process. It seems your submission was flagged and never reached us. Marcus frowned. Flagged? By who? A long pause, then administrative error, apparently. He didn't have to ask who. He already knew. Harper cleared his throat. After seeing it ourselves, we're deeply impressed. We'd like to extend an official invitation to include The Streets Remember as a special late entry screening tomorrow evening. Marcus sat in stunned silence. Are you serious? Absolutely, Harper said. You've struck a chord with audiences. And frankly, this festival needs to recognize that. Marcus exhaled slowly. Thank you. As he hung up, a quiet smile crept across his face. It wasn't revenge he felt. It was validation. The next evening, the theater buzzed with tension. The last-minute screening had drawn a crowd. Critics, filmmakers, students, and even some festival board members. Victoria stood in the back, her face tight, her smile frozen in place. She hadn't wanted to attend, but Harper insisted. Optics, he'd said. You need to show support. The lights dimmed. The screen came to life. And as Marcus's film played, the entire room fell silent. There were no special effects, no A-list stars, just emotion, truth, and courage. By the end, when the credits rolled, the silence broke into thunderous applause. People stood, cheered, whistled, and Marcus, sitting quietly in the back row, closed his eyes for a second, letting the sound wash over him. Victoria clapped too, but slowly, carefully, her palms barely touching. She couldn't deny it anymore. The film she'd dismissed as amateur had just outshined every project she'd approved. When the lights came up, Daniel Harper turned to her. You know, he said lightly, if we'd missed this one completely, it would have been a disaster. Victoria forced a smile. Yes, thank goodness we didn't. But inside, she felt the weight of every arrogant word she'd ever spoken. That night, social media exploded again, this time with photos from the packed theater, videos of the standing ovation, and quotes from audience members calling The Streets Remember the most powerful film of the festival. And now it wasn't just the public saying it, it was the jury. By the next morning, the buzz was undeniable. Every corner of the Silver Coast Film Festival, from the press lounge to the lobby cafe, was alive with one name, Marcus Reed. Critics couldn't stop talking about The Streets Remember. Hashtags trended across social media. The film, they ignored, Marcus Reed, real cinema. In one of the green rooms, a group of producers whispered over lattes, it's all anyone's talking about. He's the story of the year. You realize this might overshadow the actual lineup, right? And in the center of it all, Victoria Sloan sat at a long mahogany table during the festival board meeting, her polished smile cracking around the edges. Across from her, Daniel Harper, the jury chair, tapped his pen against a printed ballot. There's been a development, he began. The jury's decided to make an amendment to this year's nominations. Victoria's head snapped up. Excuse me? The list was finalized last week. Harper nodded calmly. Normally, yes, but given the overwhelming public response, and after reviewing The Streets Remember, we've unanimously agreed to include it in the Best Picture category. The words hit her like a slap. That's highly irregular, she said sharply. We can't change nominations mid-festival. It sets a terrible precedent. Harper's tone remained measured. A terrible precedent would be ignoring a film this extraordinary. We missed it once. We're not missing it again. A murmur spread across the room. Even the other board members, most of whom usually nodded along with Victoria, looked uncertain. She felt her authority slipping like sand through her fingers. Daniel, this isn't about the film. It's about process. We have rules for a reason. Harper met her gaze evenly. Rules exist to protect fairness, not bury it. The room fell silent. Victoria's lips tightened, but she said nothing. The vote was taken. Unanimous. When the meeting ended, she walked out stiffly, her heels clicking hard against the floor, every step echoing with humiliation. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in his apartment, sipping coffee, when his phone rang again. "Mr. Reed," came Harper's voice, warm this time, "I have good news. Your film has officially been nominated for Best Picture." Marcus froze, the words sinking in slowly. "Wait, are you serious?" "Completely," Harper said, chuckling. "You've started something bigger than a festival, Marcus. You've reminded people what storytelling is supposed to be." Marcus leaned back, stunned. "Thank you, sir. I don't even know what to say." "Say nothing," Harper replied. "Just keep making films like that." When the call ended, Marcus sat quietly for a long moment, looking around his tiny apartment, the peeling paint, the stacks of unpaid bills, the borrowed camera gear still in the corner. Then he smiled, because this moment wasn't just for him. It was for every young black filmmaker who'd been told no before being heard. Later that afternoon, the festival announced the nomination publicly. The internet erupted again. Interviews, hashtags, reaction videos. Silver Coast makes historic reversal. Marcus Reed earns surprise Best Picture nod. Festival fixes mistake, or tries to. Every headline carried his name, and every headline carried her shame. Victoria watched the press conference from her office, the walls closing in. On the TV screen, Daniel Harper was praising Marcus's film, calling it a vital work that redefines the boundaries of independent cinema. Beside him, the screen showed a still from Marcus's movie, the final frame of his lead character standing alone under a streetlight, simple, honest, perfect. Victoria's throat tightened. She whispered to herself, "This can't be happening." Her assistant poked his head in. Victoria? The press wants to know if you'll be presenting the Best Picture award this year." She turned slowly, her smile returning, thin, brittle, false. "Of course I will," she said, because no matter how much it burned, she wasn't going to run. She would walk on that stage, smile for the cameras, and pretend this hadn't become her reckoning. But deep down, she knew. The next time she saw Marcus Reed, it wouldn't be in passing. It would be under the spotlight. And this time, she'd be the one standing in his shadow. The night of the Silver Coast Film Festival Awards arrived like a storm disguised in gold. The city glittered with spotlights and camera flashes, red carpet rolled across marble steps, and 1,000 guests poured into the Pacific Arts Theater dressed like royalty. It was the kind of night that turned people into masks, all smiles, all surface. Marcus Reed stood quietly near the entrance, wearing a simple black suit that didn't quite fit, borrowed from a friend. He adjusted his tie nervously, trying to breathe through the chaos. The cameras, the shouting photographers, the celebrities posing under bright lights. He didn't care about any of that. He just wanted to represent his story, his people, with dignity. When he stepped inside, he could feel eyes on him. Not mockery this time. Curiosity, admiration. People whispered as he passed, "That's Marcus Reed, the guy whose film went viral, the one they rejected." He smiled politely and kept walking. At the far end of the lobby, Victoria Sloan stood near the stage doors, her gown immaculate, her composure rehearsed to perfection. Cameras loved her, but tonight her smile was thinner than usual, her laughter more brittle. She spotted Marcus across the room. For a moment she hesitated. Then she stepped forward, heels clicking softly against the floor. "Mr. Reed," she greeted, her tone polished but tight. He turned, calm and respectful. "Mrs. Sloan." "You look different," she said awkwardly. "I mean, congratulations on the nomination." "Thank you," he replied. "It means a lot coming from the person who made sure my film didn't make the list the first time." Her expression faltered. "That was never my intention." He tilted his head slightly. "No? Then what was?" She exhaled, lowering her voice. "Look, I made a judgment call. We get hundreds of submissions, and not everything can be included. Maybe I was dismissive. But this," she gestured toward the crowd, the lights, the cameras, "this is a chance for both of us to move forward." Marcus studied her carefully. "Move forward?" "Yes," she said quickly. "The film is a success. The festival is getting positive attention again. Everyone wins." He smiled faintly, not cruelly, but knowingly. "Not everyone." She blinked. "Excuse me?" "I didn't make that film for the festival," he said quietly. "I made it because I was tired of people like you deciding what stories deserve to be told." Her face hardened slightly, though her eyes betrayed guilt. I didn't mean to, he interrupted, still calm. You didn't mean to. That's the problem. For a moment, they stood in silence, two worlds colliding under chandeliers and champagne. Then a voice echoed from the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The ceremony is about to begin. Marcus nodded politely and walked past her toward the theater doors. Victoria watched him go, her reflection shimmering faintly in the glass, and for the first time, she didn't see power staring back at her. She saw regret. The ceremony unfolded in a blur of applause and spotlights. Awards were handed out: Best Cinematography, Best Sound, Best Short Documentary. Each speech faded into another, but everyone knew what they were waiting for. Finally, the host stepped forward, voice booming through the speakers. And now, the moment we've all been waiting for. Best Picture. A hush fell over the crowd. Victoria walked up to the stage, envelope in hand, her heart pounding. She smiled for the cameras, but her fingers trembled slightly. She unfolded the card and froze. Her throat went dry. The audience waited. The host leaned toward her microphone. Ms. Sloan? She looked up, eyes scanning the crowd until she found him. Marcus Reed, sitting near the front, composed and still. Then she took a breath. And the award for Best Picture goes to... She swallowed hard. The Streets Remember, directed by Marcus Reed. The theater exploded in applause. People leapt to their feet, cheering. Cameras flashed like fireworks. Marcus stood slowly, his expression calm but full of emotion. Not triumph, but something deeper. Peace. He walked toward the stage as the applause roared around him. When he reached Victoria, she handed him the award. Their eyes met, hers wet with shame, his steady with grace. He took the trophy, nodded once, and stepped to the microphone. Thank you, he began, voice steady but strong. I wasn't supposed to be here tonight. I wasn't invited, I wasn't accepted, and I wasn't expected. The crowd fell silent. But I learned something, he continued. You don't need permission to tell your story. You just need courage to tell it anyway. Applause erupted again. And to everyone who's ever been told their voice doesn't matter, Marcus said, holding up the trophy, this is proof that it does. He turned briefly toward Victoria. Even when they try not to hear it. The audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Cameras zoomed in on Marcus's face, calm, proud, unbroken. Victoria clapped softly, tears glimmering under the stage lights. For the first time, she wasn't applauding for show. She was applauding because she finally understood. The morning after the Silver Coast Awards, the world looked different. The festival banners still hung across the streets, but the names on everyone's lips weren't the usual stars or sponsors. They were saying his name. Marcus Reed, the guy with the $2,000 film, the one who spoke truth on stage. Clips of his speech flooded social media, stitched into montages of cheering crowds and tearful audience members. Major news outlets ran headlines. Rejection to revolution. Marcus Reed's victory at Silver Coast. The streets remember, and so does Hollywood. For the first time, Marcus wasn't chasing recognition. Recognition was chasing him. At the festival headquarters, Victoria Sloan sat alone in her office. Her awards and framed photos seemed to mock her now. A gallery of years spent chasing prestige instead of purpose. The phone had rung all morning, interviews canceled, sponsors questioning her leadership, the board requesting an emergency review. But none of that hurt as much as the simple truth she saw everywhere online. People praising Marcus's honesty while condemning her arrogance. She stared at the screen, scrolling through comment after comment. Then she sighed, stood up, and opened her desk drawer. Inside was a plain white envelope, the one that had held the original rejection letter she'd sent him. She held it for a long time, then placed it in the trash. It was time to do what she should have done from the beginning. Listen. That evening, Marcus arrived at a small community theater in downtown Los Angeles. It was packed, not with celebrities, but with students, indie directors, and young filmmakers holding notebooks instead of champagne glasses. He had been invited to speak at a free screening of The Streets Remember. When he stepped onto the stage, the applause was softer this time, but warmer. Not fame, but respect. Thank you, he said, smiling. When I started making this film, all I had was a camera, a story, and a reason. I didn't know if anyone would care. I just hoped someone might feel it. He paused, scanning the faces in the crowd, young, diverse, hungry. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You don't need their permission to matter. You already do. The crowd clapped, some cheering, others tearing up. As Marcus stepped off the stage, a familiar voice called from the back. Mr. Reed. He turned. Standing there, in a plain gray coat and no makeup, was Victoria Sloan. The crowd fell silent. Cameras lifted instinctively. Everyone recognized her. Marcus met her gaze calmly. Ms. Sloan. She stepped forward slowly. I owe you an apology. He said nothing, just waited. I judged you, she said, voice trembling slightly. Not your film, not your story. You. I saw what I expected to see, not what was really there. And that's my failure, not yours. Her words hung in the air, raw and unguarded. I can't change what I did, she continued, but I can change how I lead, starting now. Marcus studied her for a moment, then nodded. That's all anyone can do. She looked at him gratefully. You deserve every bit of this. Congratulations. Thank you, he said simply. Then, to everyone's surprise, he offered his hand. Victoria hesitated, then took it. The cameras flashed, but for once neither of them was performing. It wasn't about publicity. It was about peace. The crowd broke into applause, not loud or wild, but meaningful. Weeks later, the Silver Coast Film Festival released an official statement announcing a new initiative, the Marcus Reed Grant, a fund to support underrepresented filmmakers in telling their stories without barriers. And at the top of the release, the quote read, "Talent has no color, and truth needs no budget." Marcus Reed. Months later, Marcus sat on his apartment balcony, laptop open, typing the first lines of his next script. The world was still noisy, still unfair, still divided. But something had changed. He had turned rejection into revolution. The doorbell rang. It was a courier with a thick envelope. Inside was a letter from a major studio, an offer to finance his next project. Marcus smiled, setting it aside for later. Because tonight wasn't about money or fame, it was about reflection, about the road from silence to voice. He looked out at the city skyline, the same one that had ignored him once, now glowing with opportunity. He whispered softly, "The streets remember, and so do I." The screen faded to black,